Hey, I'm Serenity and this is my channel and welcome back to my kitchen. Today we are back again to make another vintage style heart cake, this time a tres leches with strawberry filling from start to finish together. I've been wanting to make a tres leches layered cake for ages in the shape of a heart, but I never had the excuse to make it, and now with the holiday I did. I'm going to put it down because it's really heavy. We're going to be going through together how to make the mixture for the mouth, from the cake mix to my recipe for the whipped cream and the filling of the strawberries that I want to say massacred. I don't know what the word is. And then I'm actually going to teach you how to cut a heart cake like I do very often. So if you want to watch it, let's get into it. Welcome back to my kitchen. So to start, we got, of course, to make the actual cake. I'm using Angel Food cake mix because one, I'm lazy. Two, I don't want to make cake from scratch. But this is what we're using today. And I'm going to be using 8-inch heart pans again, just because I want this cake to feed a lot of people. My first time ever attempting a tres leches layered cake, much less a tres leches heart cake. So if this goes up, we did it. And of course, for our tres leches, if you don't know, that means 3 milks. So we have 14 ounces of evaporated milk, 14 ounces of sweetened condensed milk. My dogs found the can and ate the label, but we don't waste ingredients. And then whole milk. Whole milk. None of this 1% bullshit, okay? None of this. This tastes like water. You guys need to, gross. 2%'s okay. Fat-free, 1%, get it away from my kitchen, okay? Same for you. Get it away from your kitchen. So let's prep our pans. Not really sure how I'm gonna soak the mixture in yet. I'm thinking I might do it in the pan and then freeze it. So we really need to make sure these pans are very well greased because they're probably gonna go in the freezer. But yeah, let's get started. To line my pans, I'm using parchment paper and I'm just tracing the heart shape, and then I'm going to grease the bottom of my pan using this baking spray. This works the best, but this is a step further like I mentioned. So I'm now going to line the sides of the pans with the leftover parchment. That way I can release the cakes as easily as I can. And then I'm also going to put a strip across the cakes so I have an easy pull tab if I cannot get the cake out of the pan. And being as liberal as I can with the baking spray, we don't want this to get stuck in the pan. Setting those aside, let's use our cake mix. So I'm doing a 1/3 cup of milk and then the rest water, like on the cake mix it says. This wasn't gonna work, okay, and you'll see in a minute, but I feel it's only right that I show you my wrongs. So don't use an Angel Food cake. If you're gonna use box mix, just use yellow or vanilla. But I split the batter in between two and put them in the oven to bake. While those were in the oven baking, it's time to make our milk mixture. So I used a 1/4 cup of whole milk, then the full can of evaporated and the full can of condensed, and gave this a good whisk. I wanted this to get to room temperature, so I set it aside and I tried it. It was pretty good. I'm also going to be decorating with some strawberries. So this is just, well, they're just strawberries I bought. And I think I'm going to try to mascate them. Is that the right word? That's not the right word. But bring out the juices in them. So we're going to need some sugar. We're going to try to do this as best as we can. So I just washed my berries and now I'm just going to chop them in 4 by taking off their leaves first and repeating that till I use about almost all of my berries. And then in a separate bowl, I'm also going to be just chopping berries in half to put on top of my cake. So I needed 3 berries for that, and the rest are for my filling. You're going to need a lot more than you think. That is where I went wrong. So maybe 2 pints of strawberries would have been better, but now I know that going forward, because when they soak in the sugar, they actually shrink a little. So we are just going to put a couple tablespoons of sugar, about 3, mix them up and set them aside. I don't know where we went wrong, besties, but I'm gonna whip up just a regular cake mix from scratch of vanilla. After that fail, I made just vanilla from scratch, and I'm cutting off the tops of these cakes so they're flat. I usually wouldn't do this, but I'm doing this because I really need the milk to soak in through the layers, and I'm also eating these as a little snack because this is tiresome. Then I'm going to take a fork and poke holes, but don't touch the bottom, so about 3/4 of the way through. That way our cake can soak in through those holes. Half of the liquid in each cake. Once they soak, right here, you can literally watch it. I'm going to plop these babies in the freezer. We're doing a whipped topping. You know, you can call it a chantilly cream, whatever you really want. So we're gonna need vanilla extract. This is vanilla paste. Some sort of jello. You need to stabilize your whipped cream with something, so you can use powdered sugar. I'm using jello, cheesecake flavor, just to give it a little taste. And the most important part, heavy cream. You need Miss Heavy Cream here. Also, why is it so expensive? I don't know. This is a quart of cream. That is what you're gonna need for your topping. I placed my bowl in the freezer for about 30 minutes so it got nice and cold. Then pouring in my heavy cream, and you're going to start slow, so 2 up to 5. Once a whip starts to happen, you can add half a packet of jello and vanilla extract, and then you have your whipped cream. So I'm putting the coupler in the piping bag and then spatulaing in my whipped cream into the piping bag, fitting as much as I can. I would have used a less stiff consistency, so maybe not jello, next time powdered sugar, because this was really hard to pipe. But finally it was time to decorate our cake. So my cakes were still in the pan like I mentioned, so I'm putting a little bit of the whipped cream on the bottom, then pulling out the side pieces and flipping the cake over and kind of smacking her to get her out of the pan, pulling off the rest of my parchment and pushing her onto my cake board. And this is when I realized it was too hard to pipe the whipped cream, so I just smacked some onto the cake and spread it out into a thin layer and covered these sides too. I like to do this when I decorate my cakes. Each layer cover the sides. It just makes crumb coat easier. Smoothed it out as best as I could. You know, this is just a crumb coat. Did my border wall, which helps keep the strawberries intact. Smooth it out, and then I do this little thing where I kind of create a seam so the filling doesn't go past and seep out, putting our strawberries on there, and I'm using a little bit of the juices just to have it nice and sweet and it can soak in, and then repeating the same step, putting my next cake layer on top and doing a crumb coat. I'm sealing the seam where the two cakes meet so nothing can seep out here, and going in to kind of fill in these gaps. I don't want to see too much of the cake, but it is a tres leches and that is normal when it comes to these cakes. So smoothing this out as best I could. Then it's going to go in the freezer to get just a little tacky before we smooth it with a hot spatula. I'm trying to make this as smooth as possible. But once it was out of the freezer, I went in with even more whipped cream for our next top coat. This is our final layer. This is the final level of defense. So I'm trying to see no cake gaps here, but if we do, it's okay. And this whipped cream was pretty tough to work with, so definitely a looser consistency going forward would be better. But my number one tip that I say all the time is a hot scraper is your best friend. So I have a cup of hot water. Between each swipe of the cake, I'm putting the scraper back in the water and smoothing it out so I get nice smooth edges, especially with a whipped cream that is pretty textured. Once it's as smooth as I can get it, any blank bald spots we're going to cover with piping, so it's going to go back in the freezer till it can get kind of tacky. And starting with a 6B tip I'm using from Hobby Lobby, doing these little dollops all around the border, and I like to make sure my borders go in the same direction. I don't go all the way around the cake. I don't like that. That's like an ick of mine on these cakes. So that is the tip I'm using for the top and bottom. The next tip I'm using is this Wilton 102 petal tip, which this is when I realized it was really hard to pipe because the frosting would melt in my hand. So from the heat of my hand, I was doing a lot of pressure and I was trying not to make the piping bag burst. But the last tip we're using is this 21 star tip from Hobby Lobby to do these little dollops on top of our swoops, and then it's the center dollop between all the swoops. I don't know what that's called, but you can literally see it. I'm also going to use this tip going in the opposite direction of the first pipe to do a smaller border inside, and then I'm going to repeat the same step on the bottom portion of the cake. I'm doing little dollops to put my strawberries somewhere they can sit on properly, as you can see here. So 2 across from each other, 2 on the top and bottom of the point, and then 2 more at the top of the heart where the arch is. Then going in again, you can see how I'm holding my piping bag differently because it was so hard to pipe. I will say, because there is no butter, it's not really stabilized, so it was harder to pipe because it melted quickly. It was just cream. You can see on this top border I'm doing that I kept wiping them away because they were melting, but there she is all completed. I absolutely love her and she tasted amazing. And you can see all our flaws are covered up. So to cut a heart cake, this is actually pretty simple, but again, my number one tip is a hot knife and a big knife. So I have a cup of water and I cut the tip of the heart off first and put that into just a food storage, then the top of the cake next across, and I cut down the middle. So normally I would just put everything in a food safe container and throw it in the fridge, but this cake particularly was going to my friend's school. She's a teacher, to hand out to her fellow teachers, so each slice is being wrapped individually. So I'm cutting and then wrapping the slice. Between each cut, the knife is going back in the hot water to get nice and clean cuts. So 4 ways down and then about 4 ways across is how many slices I usually do. You can make these thicker or thinner to your liking. Typically I can get about like 24 slices out of an 8-inch, but these were a little bigger, so it's a little bit less than that. And I'm putting these in a Ziploc bag for her so it's easier to hand out, and they just stay in the fridge overnight. The cake was also pretty frozen, so it was easier to cut. That way the milks didn't leak everywhere during this process. And that's how simple it is to cut and store a heart cake. And that is the completed tutorial on this beauty. She turned out a lot better than I thought because working with whipped cream, it was really hard and then it was melting in my hand. This is a monthly series. I'm starting teaching you how to make one cake. We're going to walk through it together in full. So I'll see you guys in a couple weeks with another one of these babies. And I'm trying to make these themes as different as possible so you can see the different techniques. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want. My socials are linked down below if you want to follow me. I know this is a weird setup, but my kitchen is literally really small. Sorry. And as always, for a palette cleanse, the doggo picture of the day is this picture of Chaos. She's sitting right here on the floor. Isn't she so cute? That's all I have for you today. Love you, mean it, kisses. Don't do something stupid, and I'll see you all next week. Bye.
I know you told your friend you're not okay, and tell me what's wrong and why you never